Hello in there. Are you all right? Good God, how long have you been back here? You look absolutely wretched. Me? I'm Dr. Lovecraft. No relation, but that doesn't matter. We have to get you to a hospital or sick bay or something. How did you even get that many paper cuts? I can't have you bleeding all over my stacks here. What's that in your hand? A file? You want me to read this to you? You've lost half your blood, and you want me to read you a file? Are you mad? Ugh. Very well. I suppose I ought to grant you one last request, if you really are dying. Let's see now. SCP-1035, Object Class Safe. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-1035 is to be kept at Site-19's Biological Storage Facility while research into its properties continues. Level 3 researchers assigned to the project may request the use of SCP-1035 for research provided that requisition forms for D-Class personnel are filed at least 1 week prior. Are you still alive? Good, well, just listen to my voice and try not to pass out. Materials that have been exposed to SCP-1035 for extended periods of time are to be treated as Class 2 biohazards and incinerated. Description: SCP-1035 is a pink woolen mitten, possibly handmade, intended for wear by a small child. Interviews with the family suggest that another mitten of similar appearance was lost up to months prior to discovery. Its current location and whether it shares SCP-1035's effects is unknown. It is difficult to determine the precise date and time at which SCP-1035 began to manifest its effects, although extrapolation of currently available medical records suggests that the effects began during late February 19... SCP-1035 first came to the attention of the Foundation as a result of a Foundation asset embedded at Memorial Hospital, who at the time was investigating a possible... As a result of his position at the hospital, he was a witness to the death of Sally during an emergency surgery, the first recorded fatality as a result of long-term SCP-1035 exposure. All civilians involved, including the parents of the child and medical staff, were administered varying doses of amnestics, and a cover story was spread involving a case of necrotizing fasciitis. You haven't been exposed to this SCP, have you? You'd tell me if you were, right? All right, well, let's move on. Shortly thereafter, Agent was able to safely recover SCP-1035 from the family. Any organic matter placed within SCP-1035 begins to enter a rapidly accelerated state of decomposition. Short-term exposure to SCP-1035, less than 2 consecutive hours, is not usually harmful to healthy humans, as the human immune system is generally able to cope with SCP-1035. Visible symptoms will begin to be displayed after approximately 2 hours of exposure, and by 24 hours, health complications will usually have been progressed to the point that the subject's death is all but inevitable. Non-living substances, non-human life, and human subjects with pre-existing health conditions may experience different effects from exposure to 1035, especially... For a more comprehensive outline of SCP-1035's effects and an overview of experimentation on SCP-1035, see Document 1035. Exposure to SCP-1035 is cumulative, and repeated short-term exposure to SCP-1035 can be fatal. Humans who have experienced 2 hours of exposure to SCP-1035 may require over a week to return to full health. The following chart is based on information from Document 1035 and details the typical progression of symptoms in human subjects affected by SCP-1035. Less than 2 hours of exposure. No visible effects. White blood cell counts in affected subjects may fluctuate slightly. Between 2 and 4 hours. Subjects report slight tenderness in affected areas. Affected area, especially joints, may appear inflamed or swollen. White blood cell count plummets. Between 4 to 6 hours. Subjects report discomfort and soreness when attempting to move affected areas. Small patches of the affected area may appear lighter than surrounding areas, possibly as a result of the... Between 6 and 8 hours of exposure. Open sores begin to develop on affected areas, and any pre-existing injuries become greatly exaggerated. Abnormal amounts of a serous fluid may leak from these sores. Between 8 and 10 hours of exposure, subjects begin to display symptoms of sepsis. Toxins from the affected area, especially will begin to spread to the rest of the body. Between 10 and 12 hours of exposure, abnormal fungal growth has been observed in 70% of test subjects at this stage. Subjects may contract various non-fatal illnesses during this stage as a result of immune system failure. Between and hours of exposure. Excuse me. Had to keep something down there. Shouldn't have eaten Taco Bell for lunch. More than 24 hours of exposure. A almost total necrosis of affected regions. By this point, the combined effects of septic shock and will have all but ensured the death of the subject. Blank subjects have survived late-stage SCP-1035 exposure for as long as days, following extraordinary life-saving work by medical personnel. Amputation is effective in preventing other body parts from experiencing the effects of SCP-1035. Requests to test SCP-1035 in conjunction with SCP-500 and other medical-based SCPs has been denied. Supplemental material. Of course there's always supplemental material. Refer to Interview 1035-1. Well, since the report is finished, can we get you to the hospital, please? You are bleeding all over my jacket. You want to hear the interviews? Sir, do you know how much blood you've lost from those paper cuts? Good Lord. Fine, I'll find the fucking tapes. There must be somewhere around here. Here we are. The following is a transcript of an interview that took place on February 1980. It is between Agent and Sally, patient 0.
How are you feeling, Sally?
Feel cold. Can't feel most of my arm. Will I be okay?
Sure you will. I just need to ask you a few questions. When did you first put on that pink mitten?
I don't know. Does it matter?
It does. Please, answer the question.
I don't know. Last week. It was a present. Grandma made it.
You'll be fine. Now, Sally, we're going to have to operate on your arm. It won't hurt.
They won't let me see my arm, Doctor. Does it look better? Please.
This interview is over. The medical staff here wants us to amputate. There's nothing more to learn by studying the symptoms, and there's no way she'll live with that arm. This one's for anomalous infections to sort out. Agent, signing off.
Despite heroic life-saving attempts, Sally Blank died due to complications from exposure to SCP-1035. The family was later interviewed by Foundation personnel. Nothing extraordinary was unearthed from later investigations. Surveillance of the family was lifted on March 1980. The following is an interview with Dr. Blank, who founded the project.
Once the initial 24-hour period has passed, it is safe to say that further decay of the affected areas does not occur. In fact, the increased rate of decomposition has only been observed in objects completely enclosed within objects 1035. So, for example, if I stick my hand in this thing, before long, that hand's gonna rot off, but my shoulder should be alright. That doesn't mean, of course, that the rest of my body will be perfectly fine. Have you ever read up on warfare back in, say, the 19th century? One of the really big problems back then was gangrene and things like that. You know, what happens to parts when you die. Not good. Oftentimes, the areas hit bad or end up basically massive bacteria breeding centers. It's not a problem you want to deal with. That doesn't even take into account the way the thing spreads everything up. You think that Clostridium perfringens is bad? Try schistosoma. Hell, we've identified close to 100 new parasites in this. Requesting more D-class personnel for further experimentation. There's a lot we could learn from this.
Addendum. Since writing this article, blank additional objects of clothing had been recovered by Foundation agents bearing similar properties to SCP-1035. These objects are awaiting SCP classification and are to be designated SCP-2 through... The original instance of SCP-1035 will be redesignated SCP-1035-1. The project has been tasked with examining the properties, application, and source of 1035 instances. Right, that's the end of the article. There are no more interviews, there's no more anything. Please, will you come to the sickbay with me? It appears you've bled out. Well, that's unfortunate, but I suppose that is to be expected. Well, time for me to call the biohazard boys. Oh, Lovecraft, why didn't you get your fucking doctorate in Shakespearean literature like you wanted?